Welcome to my podcast. This is the first ever episode. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking with the YouTube channel Off-Brand Urbanism, who made a video describing the urban planning issues of my hometown of San Jose, California. I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. Welcome to the first ever episode of this podcast. Hopefully it's not the last. I'm your host, the voice behind the Twitter account of Car Free Fort Worth. Today, I'm joined by the YouTube channel Off-Brand Urbanism, who recently uploaded a video titled A Deep Dive into the History of City Planning in San Jose, CA. Even though I now live in Texas, I was born and raised in San Jose and was intrigued by the video, and now I'm delighted to be speaking with the producer of said video, Mr. Off-Brand Urbanism. How are you doing today?
Great. Yeah, it's been an interesting past, was it now, 10 days, I think, since the video came out.
What compelled you to create the video?
Great question. I talk a lot. I feel like I talk about the kind of topics I cover in the video, like in just casual conversations to friends over the years. And I think, especially since COVID, I've switched the content I've watched more to YouTube. Like, so it just sort of kind of came in hand. And I sort of just was writing scripts for videos just to get the idea on paper. And then I was like, I might as well just try to record my voice and go to the next step as opposed to just blog posts. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, that makes sense. A lot of what you said in the video were also kind of being that I'm from San Jose. There were thoughts that I had in my head, but I couldn't really. I don't know if I would have had the time and patience to sit down and write a script like you did. So props to you on that. And are you from near San Jose or the Bay Area?
Yeah, I don't want to dox myself, but I will say my one of my parents grew up there, and I lived within less than an hour. So a couple of people on Reddit pointed out that it was a little weird that I didn't recognize some of the things in the Wikipedia article, and it's where my relatives lived relative to some of those hotels and stuff is a little farther away. So yeah, I have been to San Jose hundreds of times in my life, probably, if I had to guess. But I've never literally lived there, but I've lived within probably without traffic, 30 minutes.
And how long have you been interested in urban planning topics?
I mean, I've been into transit, trains, my whole life. I don't know, since I started watching Thomas the Tank Engine. But definitely, I'd say past 4 years, definitely since the genre came out. I feel not just bikes kind of started it. And then before then, I feel like the kind of deep cut, early seed of it was when, this is going to be a really weird reference. CGP Grey did this video on the few, self-driving cars. And I think it's sort of a lot of people's reaction to it from city planning circles, I think kind of was one of the first things that got me thinking about this.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, I did get an undergraduate in city planning. And I think when I was in college, the YouTube channel City Beautiful, he started creating videos. That was probably about 5 years ago at this point. And then
Yeah.
and then from there, more creators just came along.
Yeah, I feel like the thing with him, and I love his content, huge fan, would love to meet him. He part of the reason I made the channel too is at least when I was first starting to make this video, there just was almost no California city planning content. He's in San Luis Obispo. He's docs himself. He is he is a professor at San Luis Obispo, but he doesn't do that much California specific content. And that was a lot of what motivated me to the channel. A lot of the more recent people are, there's Reset Arm Transit, Not Just Bikes, Oh, the Urbanity, they're Canadian. And then you have Alan Fisher, and then well, There's a Problem, or Philly based. There's this really interesting kind of situation we have where there's just a lot, this content's exploding. A lot of people are making channels, but it was only in the past couple months that there was any San Francisco based, or Bay Area based content. I know Todd God, I've talked to him, he's great. There's a guy Fog City who made a couple videos. I haven't been able to contact him. And then there was one guy, I forget his name, Asian in Transit. I'm gonna get his name because I don't want to be mean on a shout out like that.
Yeah, I think I've heard of some of those names, but I don't know if I've seen any of their videos.
But yeah, and they're all very recent. I mean, they all started while I was making this video. So at least that's, I think, one of the main impetuses for the channel.
And uh, are you involved professionally or um, academically in city planning or urban planning?
No, not at all. I joked I'm autistic. That gives me like an honorary degree. I mean that facetiously, though. Obviously,
Right.
it's not how it literally works. But besides that, I don't have like a professional background.
All right. Now let's get on to the contents of the video, I should say. The first thing that I wanted to point out, and something that I obviously noticed growing up there, is that San Jose's city limits are unnecessarily huge, in my
Yes.
opinion. It could be at least three different cities. Like I mean, I grew up in San Jose. I'll say I grew up a 10-minute bike ride from Diridon Station. And there's a lot of parts of San Jose that I didn't even know were technically in city limits until like the last couple of years. And it's interesting because now I live in Fort Worth, and Fort Worth is kind of the same thing. Its city limits are also pretty huge.
Yeah, I think this is one of the mistakes I made in the video was because of that. I accidentally called the San Jose Sharks the only professional sports team in San Jose. That's because I thought PayPal Park, where the Earthquakes play, was in Santa Clara. And if you look on a map,
It's
it's
right on the border,
literally,
pretty
it's so
much.
on the border that I had no, like, yeah. So I got like 8 comments on it. I'm like, no, this is not earthquake slander. Uh, I just straight up assumed it was a Santa Clara. Well, if you look at a map, I literally measured it from the corner of it. It's literally zero point 0.3 miles to the border. So if the whole stadium moved a half mile, it would in total be in Santa Clara.
Right, because the Santa Clara Caltrain station is pretty much right. Well, it's not right next to it, but it's right there. It's
Yeah, and
close walk.
Santa Clara University actually has housing my friend went to right next to the stadium, and it's actually in San Jose. So Santa Clara University is
Right.
like on the border. So I should have known that, but
Right.
yeah,
And to be fair, also the Earthquakes did play at Santa Clara
yes,
University's
yeah. Most of my
stadium
life
for
I've so
a few
been playing
years.
there. So yeah, they play there a decent bit. So yeah, but yeah, it's just a great example that I realized like about that. There's the if you click on Google Maps and click on it, yeah, the boundary's just very silly, and it's because of our good friend Dutch.
Yeah, I think you touched on this over the years. San Jose just kind of gobbled up unincorporated land, and I think like even El Viso, which is basically right at the bottom of the bay. I think that may have also been its own city at one point, maybe like 60 years ago. And I think maybe Cambrian Park, which is kind of like close to Campbell and Los Gatos, I think that may have also been
I
its own city at one point. So I think even
Yes,
Willow Glen may have been too, which is another neighborhood.
I'm very confident. At least yeah, I would say at least half of those have to be. I'd be shocked if yeah.
And it even also like when if you're driving in from like Gilroy or Morgan Hill, is like the city limits are pretty far south too. It's like by the pretty much like by the IBM campus down there, and even you would even like growing up, I just assumed that it was like unincorporated until you got to the 85 101 interchange, but no, they go a few more miles south of that. So
Yeah, no, that's the main thing. Like when I look at a map and I think of where my family was and where downtown is, I was like, it goes that south. I think Gilroy is like very far away to me. Gilroy is like the edge of like the Bay Area in that direction in my head, and it's like it touches San Jose,
well, it's I think it's Morgan Hill that touches San Jose.
Morgan Hill, and
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sorry,
it's the same area. I get what you're
I'm so
saying.
sorry. Yeah,
Sorry. One thing that you didn't touch on in your video, and it's not really a critique because you're not from San Jose, or
feel
so
free to
I
critique me.
understand. But one thing is that San Jose's airport uh, is actually, in my opinion, has a big influence on the city because it's so close to downtown. And because it's so close to downtown, it restricts the height of the buildings in downtown, which is part of the reason why. Um, we'll touch on this later, but it's part of the reason why there aren't really that many super tall buildings in downtown. Um,
Yeah,
and also because also another thing about San Jose's airport, which is this is kind of a bit of a tangent, but because it basically grew from like a small airport to what it is now, it can't handle that many flights because like the runways aren't far enough apart or something like that. in compared to SFO or Oakland. Um, that's one of the. This kind of connects to your point about light rail. Light rail, when it was built, was mostly, well, I guess kind of it still is. It's centered around downtown. It's kind of built to serve, like, yeah, it does go north and serves the tech companies north of downtown, but it does have like its main portion is in downtown. And when they built it, I think they anticipated that the jobs were going to be downtown, but that ended up not happening.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was kind of intentional. They sort of from the beginning with like the IBM facility, like they wanted car-centric office parks. Like they kind of did that with their like the town hall for a while. Like it was all fairly intentional.
Definitely. I mean, and obviously that was a different time period. That was 50 or maybe even more years ago when that all started to pan out. But even in recent, well, I guess 30 years ago, is it that recent anymore? But it still feels recent to me that when they first built light rail, I think, and I'm not going to say that San Jose or Santa Clara County shouldn't have light rail because I think there are locations that would benefit from having a higher capacity transit, such as Stevens Creek Boulevard, or even just going east on Santa Clara, which is now going to, what, I don't know when it's going to open, but I think they have had plans to have BRT on East Santa Clara Street going east of downtown. But it seemed like it was just a miscalculation of where the jobs were going to be, and even the office parks that it does serve north of downtown. I mean, they're surrounded by a bunch of parking. Like if you go to Google satellite view of
Yep.
North First Street, where those businesses are, where the light rail runs up and down. I mean, if you're not, they're basically inviting you to drive there, and I mean, the only reason you would probably take light rail is if your car breaks down or something like that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I think the thing I always tell people about light rail, and also there's a couple other systems like Sacramento's, which is I think almost like a sister system, is just like, yeah, you put all these moats around all your stations, and you would only use it to go to another station where there's another moat. So it kind of defeats the point of a car. So I think it's really just a question of building up around them. I think like if you put that in a well-designed city, that same route, I think it would be a lot more serviceable.
Right. And there are, I've read certain like critics of San Jose. The San Jose has an urban growth boundary, and on like the kind of the outside edges of the city. And some critics will say, oh, like they have this urban growth boundary, which kind of restricts building in this area. And that's part of the reason why housing has gotten expensive. And while that is true to an extent, they also didn't really increase the density that much over the last
Yes,
20
that's
years. So
you took the words out of my
while
mouth.
those people that criticize the urban growth boundary do have a point, I think that it didn't really upzone that much over the last what 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I think that's a story with every boundary, I think, in the Bay Area. Like, yeah, it's like a demerit. I don't think it's a smart idea. But the flip side is, hey, if you build dense enough and you're actually like preserving like a state park, and you're managing it, like, oh, okay, like that can work. But yeah, they just didn't build up. They just sort of drew a line and then just chose not to build. It kind of went hand in hand.
And the next point that I wanted to go on to is biking within the city of San Jose. I know in your video you did kind of frame it as San Jose isn't that great for biking, and yeah, we do have some big streets that aren't necessarily ideal for cycling, such as Santa Clara Street, as you pointed out. However, I will say that having grown up there and having a parent who definitely influenced me in terms of like wanting to bike to a lot of places. San Jose is pretty good for biking. As you pointed out, it is flat. And while on the surface it may look like there's a bunch of expressways and stroads, from my point of view and growing up there, it is pretty good for biking.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's more the question of like infrastructure for me. A lot of people have reached out to me about that, and I totally concede that. For me, it's just like, it's just such a cheap and easy win, and the Bear is people are just so into biking that like they're making changes now, but it's just sort of surprising like that they hadn't built something like what they're proposing this year, like a few years back. But I totally concede that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the time period that I grew up in, it was the biking infrastructure there was mostly catered to uh, road cyclists, and I have spent a lot of time doing road biking, and road biking is fun, and but I don't think it really captured the. Well, I'm not gonna say it didn't capture, but it didn't necessarily cater to the bike commuters first. It was more catered to the people who wanted to go biking for recreation and exercise, which isn't a bad thing, but it's just, I think if you really wanted to, well, and I think now they are making changes, but if you wanted to truly make it a better biking place, I think you have to have it cater to the bike commuters first.
Yeah, definitely.
So having grown up, we'll say near San Jose, 'cause I don't want to say exactly where you grew up. Were there, did you necessarily have any, like you said you grew up liking trains. I did as well. I guess was there, in like the way you grew up, did you ride Caltrain or BART a lot, or was it
Yeah,
just like
I rode BART a decent amount. Yeah, so I rode it pretty decent amount. Also, I had one of his friends, is Japanese, and we did a trip together when I was like 13, 14, and we were able to ride trains out there. And I mean,
in Japan?
yeah, in Japan.
Oh,
Yeah, we got to ride like the Shinkansen and the subway to some degree. Uh, and then whenever I traveled, I just kind of got used to trying to ride transit when I went somewhere. And only other places I've lived have all been pretty transit heavy. So I've just been doing it my whole life on top of, just, you know, like choo choo.
nice. Yeah, I grew up pretty close to the Caltrain tracks in San Jose, and if you ask my parents, they'll say that I've pretty much been interested in trains since I since I was born, or maybe if not when I was born, it wasn't long after. And what's interesting is I'll talk about my combined interest of transit and bikes here. So actually, when I went to high school, I went to high school. I grew up in San Jose, but I went to high school a little bit up the peninsula. And to get to school, before I had my driver's license, I biked to the train station, and then I took the train and then biked to school. And this kind of cuts back to what I was saying about biking earlier and how I was influenced by my parents. My dad says that like when he first moved to San Jose, and probably I don't remember how long ago it was, but when he first moved there, like he said, like the bike infrastructure wasn't great. There wasn't bike cars on Caltrain. And he says he was a trailblazer. I don't really know how much of an influence he truly was, but he says he was doing it before a lot of other people were doing it. I'll say that. And in regards to what you were saying about Japan, that I have not. The only other place where I've taken trains outside of the U.S. is the UK. I don't really remember it that well because I was younger, but um, it was it. I could. It definitely was not like the Japanese high-speed rail experience. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I
But
think,
yeah, Japan is someplace I would definitely like to go at some point. Seems
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah, I've been really fortunate. There's definitely a lot of international systems I've been able to ride on over the years. That was definitely a big one. Hong Kong system, that one is kind of like one of the gold standards. Like basically the model for a lot of what China did. And then I wrote a couple of the systems there too. Um, I think like Barcelona's metro, that one's pretty good. Just it's such a great city. That's all the ones off the top of my head that I liked overseas that I've been to. I haven't traveled too much, but like every city I've been to, I've tried to, ride transit whenever possible, often because it's cheaper.
Right. And starting to wrap up here, what do you have any future content plans for your YouTube channel?
Yes, I have a list of like easily like 40 video ideas. I already have the script written, pretty much done, and I have a rough recording and some editing already started on a second video. I'm trying to kind of cover the Bay Area with a few more videos and then hopefully expand to like the rest of the state and then, go from there more or less linearly. Kind of, I think, the similar ratio to some of the YouTubers I mentioned earlier, like how they'll do places all over the world, but then they kind of do a little bit more disproportionately to where they are. So
Right.
that's kind of the ratio I want to go for. So like maybe someday, I don't know, a third of my videos are like Bay Area, NorCal related, and then the other two-thirds the rest of the world, something like that. So I have a San Francisco related video next.
Yeah, also I don't know how your video got so popular because it just popped up in on the when I was watching YouTube, it just popped up in the side on the recommendations thing. So whatever you do, you maybe put the right tags in, or I don't know what you did, but whatever you did, it worked out.
When you upload a video, it actually says that tags don't do much. I don't know if that's just them to prevent you from putting in like 1,000 tags. My theory is to just there's a big demand for like this type of content, but there's just so many cities where outside of the transit systems, they don't really get a video on them. So there's not really another video, I think, on
Right.
city planning. And also like I responded to every comment and like that level of like the level of engagement I got, like the percentage of viewers who commented and then me replying and then them replying to me was just really high. And I think that just kind of turbocharged it to where it's at, which like isn't anything to write home about in the grand scheme of things. But for a first video with like no professional, like no experience in this before, like it's just insane to me.
All right. Well, keep up the great work. And before we go, is there any last things that you'd like to say?
No, just, I hope to keep making videos, about transit, city planning, urbanism. I have a few kind of intertangently related ideas that have been kind of cooping up. I think I promise the next video will have much higher quality. There'll be less cutaways to dumb memes, better audio. So I'm hoping to get the production values up. And yeah, I hope this podcast does well. First guest, a lot of pressure. I'd love to be like back in like a year and just see where we're both at.
Yeah, I definitely want to do get some more guests, do some more episodes. All this is a great first episode, and yeah, hopefully there'll be more in the future. And on that note, Mr. Off-Brand Urbanism, thank you for coming on, and hope your YouTube channel takes off.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I can't wait. This is going to be the biggest podcast in the history of I don't know, anything. I don't know, start small, biggest Fort Worth podcast,
We'll
a
see.
step at a time.